Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. A sixth republic? All right. Hey guys, Jesus. Hey, hey guys, my name's Connor. If you're new, original link to the video, link to the original video from Political Fronts. Great intro. I'm just such a professional, aren't I? No. But we're no restarts. That's my rule. Is it time for a French sixth republic? Political Fronts. Take it away, Simon. So the first republic, was that under Napoleon, and then Napoleon III, and then 1848, and then still Napoleon III? When did Napoleon III take power? Deposed in 1870, Franco-Prussian War. 1850, 1850. When did he gain power? Was the first and only president of the French Second Republic elected in 1848. 1848, big year.
That all hope was lost, the leaders of France, just when it seems that all hope was lost, the leaders of France have found a way to make their political predicament somehow even worse. Last week, we here at Political Fronts brought you the latest on the collapse of the French government after Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu proved unable to form a winning government and watched his choice for a cabinet fall apart after just 14 miserable hours. But now, despite trying his damnedest to hand in his resignation, French President Emmanuel Macron has forced Lecornu to remain in power and try again. According to Macron, there will be no snap elections, no compromise with the left or the right, and sacre bleu, how dare they ask for his resignation. But plainly, France's ongoing political crisis isn't coming to an end anytime soon. But at a certain point, it's worth asking.
I wonder how Macron can force the prime minister to stay in power. I mean, if he's trying to leave his job, what sort of leverage could Macron have to be like, no, you're staying? I'd love to be a fly on the wall in that room.
Ongoing political crisis isn't coming to an end anytime soon. But at a certain point, it's worth asking whether France's political crisis has passed a point of no return and whether the nation's current political system is even worth salvaging. Right now, France is built into a system known as the Fifth Republic, and as that name would suggest, the nation has a rich history of dismantling its own political systems and just starting again. This ongoing catastrophe just keeps getting worse and worse, but French history provides the ultimate escape hatch. And
the fact that France does go through these kind of crises so often and form these new things, I'm not saying it's insignificant that the possibility of a sixth French Republic isn't a big deal. Of course it is. But I feel like if there's a country that is going through turmoil, there's not many countries that I think can get through that more than I think France can, just because this is France. You know, you go through these things, and often you come out stronger in the end, and I'm sure it will be no different. So, yeah, France, special country,
and worse,
in a good way.
French history provides the ultimate escape hatch, and murmurs are growing across Paris that it might finally be time to take that step again. Faced with unending, metastasizing chaos, the answer may be the French Sixth Republic. Sixth Republic. Now, there are some episodes here on Political Fronts that we simply have to start with a bit of a history lesson, and today the opening question is simple. What is a French Republic? And branching off of that, what would it mean and what would it take to start a sixth one?
Tell me.
In essence, a new French Republic is defined by the establishment of a new constitution in which each successive republic has laid out a new political system in order to try and address the shifting needs of French society. Is defined by the establishment of a new constitution in which each successive republic has laid out a new political system in order to try and address the shifting needs of French society. The First Republic was founded during the French Revolution and ended when Napoleon Bonaparte declared the French Empire. The Second Republic was a short-lived affair, occupying the 4 years between a revolution against monarchy and the start of another empire. The Third Republic lasted 70 years from the overthrow of that prior empire until the fall of France to Nazi Germany.
Hold on. Are you talking about in between Napoleon coming back from, was it Elba?
Lasted 70 years from the overthrow of that prior empire until the fall of France to Nazi Germany in 1940. The Fourth Republic lasted 12 years and came apart due to a massive political crisis mostly centered around the question of Algerian independence. And the Fifth French Republic, the one that France has now, is about 67 years old, just a few short years away from becoming the longest-lived republic in French history. Now, every new French republic has reimagined the way that French governance works, at least to some extent. For example, compared to the Fourth Republic, the Fifth Republic vests far more power into the nation's presidency. In fact, a large part of the Fifth Republic's political potency lies in the president's ability to take unilateral actions, at least to a certain extent, in a similar way that the presidents of other nations can act in ways that cut through the delay and debate of a typical parliament. But even from the earliest days of the Fifth Republic, some prominent French figures have argued that it's far from an improvement on the system that came before. In a nation that's known for a deeply politically involved population and a population known for the ease with which it tends to become indignant toward its political leadership, the Fifth Republic isn't the foremost punching bag at their disposal, but it is a punching bag nonetheless. For decades, the Fifth Republic has been maligned for its centralization of power in the presidency, taking power away from the far larger group of leaders that the French people elected and tasked with forming their government. French affairs have become more centralized, and the Fifth Republic's political culture has become far more technocratic and centrist, forming a bureaucracy that's lethargic at best and an absolute
So what's the difference between a technocracy and an oligarchy? Relating to or characterized by the government or characterized by the government or control of society or industry by an elite of technical experts. Okay. Shoot. Oh my god. Oh my god. Nice.
Nightmare to deal with at work. Centrist, forming a bureaucracy that's lethargic. Political culture has become.
I've never been so unhappy with how much I understand in such a short period of time in a video.
Their government. French affairs have become more centralized, and the Fifth Republic's political culture has become far more technocratic and centrist, forming a bureaucracy that's lethargic at best and an absolute nightmare to deal with at worst. Quoting Simon Cooper, writing in the Financial Times in 2023 in an argument to dissolve the French Republic, quote, "Post-war France's governing philosophy became a sort of French Confucian rule by the cleverest boys in the class, plucked from all ranks of the population. Typically a G7 summits, the leader with the highest IQ and broadest hinterland beyond politics is the French president. And while rule by the smart is a rather popular idea among the French intelligentsia, it's led to a political system that's overly complicated, inaccessible, and at times actively fights against populist leaders who are looking to represent the will of the people. The powerful French protest movements of recent history have, in part, been an artifact of just how sheltered France's leaders can often be, with the people forced to take to the streets in massive numbers for extended periods just to get their leaders to hear the idea that something isn't working as intended. Prominent opposition parties have long advocated the idea of a Sixth Republic, as well as the importance of weakening the president's executive powers and granting more autonomy to French regions and overseas territories. In 2023, protests over a deeply unpopular pension reform took on the rallying cry, "Down with the Fifth Republic," after Macron used his presidential powers to force the reforms to become law. Spin the clock forward to 2025, and the situation in France is more dire than ever. The nation's parliament is split into thirds, with no side able to govern effectively. 4 governments have collapsed in the span of the last 2 years. Both the French left and the French right are pledging to censure the new government as soon as it's...
Guys, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I am very confused. I am very confused.
No side able to govern effectively. 4 governments have collapsed in the span of the last 2 years.
How? like governing coalitions. I feel like I need to watch a refresher or just a video on how French politics and French governing works to really understand what I'm listening to. How can you have 4 coalitions fall apart in 2 years? And I mean, how is that possible? Not that there might be reasons for it.
With no side able to govern effectively. 4 governments have collapsed in the span of the last 2 years, both the French left and the French right, pledging to censure the new government as soon as it's announced, and each of them are expected to batter what remains of President Macron's political coalition next time elections take place. Ex-President Nicolas Sarkozy was just sentenced to a 5-year prison term. Prominent opposition leader Marine Le Pen has been banned from seeking public office in any future elections, and the nation is facing down a debt crisis that could prompt direct intervention from the International Monetary Fund. Macron's approval rating sits below 20% nationwide, and in one poll this past September, a full 90% of French
Below 20%?
Low 20% nationwide, and in one poll this past September, a full 90% of French respondents agreed that the nation's political class is not up to the task of running the nation.
I gotta love France, to be honest. France is the one country where if there is a political crisis and giant, like, revolting in the streets that would spell doom for other countries' confidence in that state, any other country would, but with France, it's like it's another Tuesday or something. So, how do I say this? And tell me if I'm wrong, but political turmoil in France seems less of a alarm than in other countries because your culture is so ingrained in popular protest and anger towards the government. That makes sense?
Things in France are really bad right now, and perhaps more important than the dysfunction itself, the root causes for the dysfunction seem to stem from the way the Fifth Republic functions. Whether you're in the camp that says the current dysfunction is due to fundamental flaws with the Fifth Republic itself, or you're in the camp that would say that the Fifth Republic's ideals were compromised or even abused by its latest collection of leaders, the core of the matter is the same. The Fifth French Republic, as it exists right now, is not working for the French people. Maybe the answer is down with Macron. Maybe the answer is down with the whole system. Burn it all. Now, here's a tip for anybody watching at home. If you want to overthrow a government, then it's a good idea to take the time to make a list of pros and cons before you do. It's really the bare minimum when it comes to regime change. In that spirit,
I'm still confused as to actually what defines a new republic in France. I'm still a bit confused.
It's important.
New constitution, reforms, and
it's really the bare minimum when it comes to regime change. In that spirit, it's important to start asking some clarifying questions about a hypothetical Sixth Republic. What would be the benefits? What would be the costs? On the side of the benefits, perhaps the most obvious would be that in transitioning to a new republic, France would transition to a new constitution, allowing the nation to fundamentally rethink the way that it wants to operate. If you're going to throw out the old rules...
Okay, are we talking about tossing out the constitution? Or are we talking about tweaking and changing parts of the Constitution?
Allowing the nation to fundamentally rethink the way that it wants to operate. If you're going to throw out the old rules and usher in the new, then you've got a critical window to think about what the new rules should be based on the lessons learned from the better part of a century spent living under the old order. For modern France, the new rules would almost certainly center on redistribution of power away from the presidency, the sprawling executive bureaucracy, and the distinct French political class that it created. Some calls for a Sixth Republic have called for a transition to an American-style system, getting rid of the title of Prime Minister, who is basically turned into a chosen executor of the president's will. The legislature would likely be made stronger, power may be shifted away from Paris and toward regional capitals or even municipal leadership, and France's overseas territories could gain far more of a voice as well as a measure of increased self-determination.
Sorry, when you said looking towards American style of government, it caught me off guard because we aren't exactly in our best form nowadays. So it really shocked me that we need to look towards America as if we're running very smoothly.
These territories could gain far more of a voice, as well as a measure of increased self-determination. While those changes wouldn't solve many of the immediate problems facing France, they would shift something much more fundamental, creating a system of governance that's better empowered and more willing to act in service of the French public. Advocates of a Sixth Republic argue that in a better political system, it wouldn't be so difficult to balance the books or navigate international affairs or improve public policy. Instead, the best ideas from the best leaders would stand a better chance at standing out, even when they didn't come from within that enduring political class. Politics could be made far more representative by placing the responsibilities of leadership into the hands of hundreds of people who the French public elected, rather than into the hands of one elected official who...
Yeah, I can see, like, if you're going to change the current administration governing body of France into another governing body that has the same authority, but just different views on how to, on politics and more left or more right or wherever, well, if you still allow them the same authority, then you're going to end up with the same problems, just with different leaders. And so giving more power into elected representatives is different than that. So guys, what the hell do I know? I'm someone who loves learning, and a lot of the times I'm worried I'm talking as if I know more than I really do. I don't. I'm learning like you guys, and so whatever I say, I hope you don't think that I know that this is the answer, my opinion.
And then people who the French public elected, rather than into the hands of one elected official who can then delegate responsibilities to bureaucrats the nation has never heard of. Citizens could be empowered to demand change through referendums. They could better elevate leaders who actually have something to say, and they could see their political decisions through elections bring change faster and more consistently than is currently the case. But for every potential benefit lies a potential drawback.
Well, faster doesn't make any sense. If you want fast decision making, then you need very little people to have the power to make decisions. You can't have both. You can't say we don't want too much power in the hand of a smaller group. We want power spread between more people, and that'll lead to faster decision making. No, that'll lead to slower decision making, but slower decision making that is more democratic, right? So I'm not criticizing people wanting less centralized power. I'm not at all. I'm just saying, thinking that you'll get faster decision making with more spread out power doesn't make any sense to me, you know?
For one thing, it's not a small matter to just toss
I'm not
aside
French.
an entire...
This has nothing to do with me. I've like, you obviously do what you want. I'm just giving my
potential drawback.
Why do I have to... I need to shut up.
Consistently than is currently the case. But for every potential benefit lies a potential drawback. For one thing, it's not a small matter to just toss aside an entire political system and draw up a new one. France does not exist in a vacuum. It is a critical part of the European Union and an important player on the global stage.
Yeah.
It's not possible to simply take France offline for a little while and do some software updates. Instead, any process to overhaul the French political system would foster real instability both at home and all across the world. The move would almost certainly be opposed by the French political class, whose deep ties to economic, financial, academic, and media leaders would help to sway public opinion back in favor of the status quo. Any new sets of rules would have to be agreeable to a wide majority of French society, and in today's starkly divided political environment, that's a difficult outcome to imagine. And perhaps the greatest drawback of all is that if France is going to transition into a Sixth Republic under a new constitution, then somebody's got to write that constitution, and right now, there is nobody in France who's up to the challenge. Macron would be the obvious unifying figure, except that his public approvals are so far in the toilet that they're making their way to the Seine, not to mention that he's a dyed-in-the-wool institutionalist with a clear preference for the status quo. France's three-way divide includes a hard left and a hard right that are practically equal in their powers but diametrically opposed on just about every issue, and if one of them were to try and write a new constitution, the other would almost certainly be be bitterly opposed to it. Maybe in our wildest dreams, those two powerful populist coalitions could hammer out a new constitution using their few fundamental points of agreement about how French politics should work, but that would be like them living in the cheesiest and least believable episode of The West Wing that Aaron Sorkin ever composed. But reality is very unlikely to match up, no matter how nice that outcome might sound. For France to transition to a new Sixth Republic would actually be fairly straightforward, at least in a procedural sense. After crisis and deadlock, the National Assembly would create a so-called Constituent Assembly with the sole purpose of drafting a new constitution. French leaders would likely try to foster grand public debates and discourse over just what a new constitution should be as the people express their collective will through a series of referendums, eventually culminating in a final voice to either accept or reject the document that should guide the Sixth Republic into the future. It would take a while, it would be loud and controversial, but on balance, it wouldn't be all that complicated. After all, France has 5 historical examples to study, and its leaders could probably find their way through to a resolution.
There's any country in the world that can survive a big change like this, it's France.
But in order to make that happen, somebody would have to lead the process, and France's political leadership would have to be far less polarized and far more capable of working together than they currently are. The French Fifth Republic is in a period of deadlock, unable to undertake the important work of governance, and transitioning from the Fifth Republic into a hypothetical Sixth would be a far more difficult challenge than anything that France's leaders are even attempting to do. Perhaps a Sixth Republic really is the answer, perhaps it's not, but until France can get its together well enough to engage in basic acts of governance, we're probably not going to find out. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for making great channel, or great video from great channel, many of which Simon is a part of. So, the last thing I'd like to say is great video, very interesting. Would appreciate any comments down below, answers to any questions, guys. As always, you're great at that. But my leaving comment is that when you're trying to make big changes, please let me know if you disagree. When you're trying to make big changes in government, there is a huge difference to me in you thinking that if you make the changes that your party wants to do, especially the more left or more right your party is, if you admit that we will have some hurting, right, in the interim between the former French Republic and a new constitution, there's a huge difference between saying, you know, this isn't working out, we need to go this way. I am aware, we are well aware of the possible consequences, negative consequences in the short term, but in the long term, we believe we'll create a better society, a better France. There's a big difference between that and what I see a lot online, and maybe I'm too much online and I'm having a wrong diagnosis of this, analysis of this, but there's a big difference between that and thinking that and stating that, or not recognizing those fallbacks and like, no, that's not going to happen. We're only going to get better. That is terrifying. And that goes for the far left or the far right. That is terrifying because it shows me that you do not have a grasp. You're too idealistic and not realistic enough. Have a balance. If you say, yeah, we need to go to this very different direction because I think it's better for France in the future, and when I say, okay, but you're going to have domestic and foreign policy struggles in that, and you say, no, that's not going to happen, of course that's going to happen. But if you say, yes, I know, and we will work through those, but we will reach a better France in the end, that's okay. But when you don't say you'll have any problems in the interim, it scares the hell out of me. Because I'm like, you're not even thinking this through. You're just red-eyed left or right. And you just, no matter what, that's what happens. And anyone who questions me, it's like, you're wrong, it's going to be perfect. That's terrifying. I'm not French. I love France. I love French history and culture. I've been there a few times. Would love to go again. And this is obviously ultimately up to you. But I've given my opinions. Please, if I said anything wrong or you disagree with, call me out in the comments. I mean this. I want nothing more than that, okay? If I said something you disagree with, let me know down below. Also, you're great with answering any questions I have, as always. Love you guys. Hope everyone's doing well. Chin up if you're not. Look at me. You'll be good soon. Don't worry. Emotions are fickle, my friend. For real. Bye, guys.